Hey, welcome to our podcast, Live Him Out, where our goal is to educate and motivate people how to live Him out in their daily lives. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the surprising way that God is working in the youth today. So, welcome to our podcast.
All right, welcome to our podcast today. I'm real excited because it's just me and Truett today.
Yeah.
And it's good to have guests, but sometimes it's good for us just to be us here.
Yeah.
And talking about a subject that both of us have some experience in. And so we're going to talk about the surprising way God is working in youth today. So I know it's easy to look at what's going on today and maybe not be so positive about what's happening among young people. But believe it or not, God is working in young people.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that today. But to set it all up, I think we have to go back a little bit. We're going to go back in time a little because when I first moved into the ministry, I'm working with young people. I'm doing student ministry, but it is the mid-'80s. It's 83, 84, 85, right in there. And everything is different. So what we're going to do today is take a look at what life was like in the 80s.
Yeah.
Some experiences that were going on for young people and what happened in youth ministry. And then I had another opportunity to work with young people in the 2010s. So at that point, I'm pastoring a small church, and Heather and I are also working with all the young people. So different experience. It's many years later, 30 years later. Culture's changed, church has changed, and we have a different experience there. And then Truett is our youth director here at Vertical now. So here we are in the 2020s, and everything has changed again, even radically from just 2010 to 2020.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to talk about 80s, 2010s, and then Truett's going to walk us through some things that he's experiencing now and where he's seeing God move. And it will be surprising to you about what God is doing and the way He is working in young people. So let's back up and start in the 80s. So it's the mid 80s. I'm working with young people at a church of about 200, 300 people. So there's 30, 40 plus in the youth group. Culture's very different back in the day.
Yeah.
Church is basically respected in the culture at the time. Public schools were the general way that people were educated. Private Christian schools were really much more fringe at this time. And there's such a respect for church that the school system and culture in general recognizes we don't have events on Sundays and we don't have events on Wednesday nights because that's when people go to church. Wow. So there's no sport events, there's no school events of any kind. They stayed away from Wednesday nights and for sure Sunday mornings. Pastors were praying at football games. It was not uncommon to have noted Christian people involved in public life, and they were respected, recognized.
Wow.
In the schools, even you had FCA was popular. That was the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and so it got to the point where it's kind of the cool kids were all involved in FCA. If you were in, you were part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So very different expression in culture at that time. In church, young people are accustomed to going to church 3 times a week. They're there on Sunday morning. They're there on Sunday nights. They're there on Wednesday nights.
Yeah. And Sunday morning is not just Sunday morning service, but probably Sunday school, Sunday service, Sunday night church, and then Wednesday night church.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a common thing. There's Sunday school and you have breakouts, for high school guys or even 9th and 10th grade guys. And then there's the service and kids are sitting together in the service. Young people are, it's usually at the back, but they're sitting together. And so families come to church together. The young people are with their parents and they go to church. It's a very different day back in the day.
For sure.
Youth issues, back then there's no cell phones, there's no Netflix, there's no internet, there's nothing like that. But you're dealing with the real issues of dating and premarital sex and cursing, you're dealing with that and taking God's name in vain and not honoring your parents. Those are kind of the big deals that we're dealing with.
For sure. Like authority seemed to be like the really big rebellious time in the 80s. That was like the primary thing, that I think it seems to be that people dealt with. And churches tried to engage with. You know,
Right.
it's the
Exactly.
authority respecting.
Yep. Respect the authorities, honor your parents, follow God. There was a general understanding of the Bible, even in the culture, much more understood than today, and a respect for it as well. Christian music at the time is kind of underground. It's just beginning. You don't have Christian radio stations that were popular. You don't even have them in existence, really, unless you could find some low-end radio, AM radio dial, something like that.
Go buy your Keith Green tracks.
Exactly. Or you found a Christian store, a Christian music store, which was rare, that sold some cassette tapes. You could find some of those. So it's not a big deal like it is today. In youth ministry, again, we're not having to convince students that the Bible is God's word. It's generally accepted. So we're able to have Bible discussions. I remember we did a forever long series we called Revelation Celebration. This was on Sunday night after church. So it wasn't, again, it's not just Sunday morning, Sunday school, Sunday church, Wednesday night. We're doing something on Sunday night after church, and we're discussing the book of Revelation. And we're eating pizza and playing games and all that kind of stuff too. But again, with music, we're singing silly songs, we're singing hymns and in youth group. So there's no Christian music. There's no Christian worship movement at the time. We're singing, I like to eat apples and bananas, and all the silly stuff. It's a different day.
At the time, people loved it.
They did. It was, people laughed and loved all that stuff.
That's the days before cell phones right there for you.
Exactly. So, but God moves in that time. We got to see many people come to Christ, young people come to Christ, young people called into ministry, serve the Lord with their life.
I mean, that's, again, right around the time you were called to ministries in the 80s, and that's the environment you're thrown right into. And it's
exactly.
And it was effective at the time, right?
It was. It worked.
At the time.
So, we fast forward, and Heather and I are back in doing some youth ministry while pastoring in the 2010s. So, our children are coming into the teenage years at this point. So, that's part of a motivator for us is, our kids are starting to be teenagers. It was a very small church. We were doing a lot. And we said, this would be great. I've got some experience in this. Would love to be involved in it. So we jump into youth ministry again. But the culture's changed, obviously, at this point. The church is distanced from the public arena at this point. It's starting to really change now. Now it's not everybody is at a public school. Now there are Christian schools, charter schools, private schools, home schools. And so when young people come to church, you don't always have these groupings that you had before. Back in the 80s, the hardest thing we dealt with was how do we mix the students from all the different public schools together, from Midlothian and Red Oak and possibly Waxahachie. But you get to the 2010s, and now there's a lot of different types of education.
With people taking more harsh stances on the education styles as well.
True.
I think.
It's true. Prayer is no longer part of the public arena and events. And then you're starting to see even various sexual expressions starting to come out and be more accepted into the public arena, and especially for young people, even in public schools, it's starting to not just be something that was hidden or even looked down on. Now it's starting to be commonplace. Church is different in 2010. The church as a whole seems to be, in America at least, seems to be losing its influence and struggling to maintain its place at that time. Young people are not as interested in matters of faith. The Bible is not as well known and even accepted as truth.
Yeah.
Young people are not attending with their parents anymore. There's begin to be a breakup in the family.
Let the kids stay home. It'll be all right. All that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Less of a, hey, this is what we do. This is we go and we learn here. This is our community. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the norms of this is acceptable or this is known behavior. This is what we do. This is our lifestyle.
Yeah,
we go to church. We trust the Bible. We follow Jesus. All of that
not just as check boxes. Not just like we have to go and do this as a family, but like and I think after time plays out in today's day, we see that as a different thing, but.
Yeah, now, parents are concerned, I don't want to force this upon my children. I want them to make the decision for themselves. So we'll let them stay home, and maybe we'll stay home. And things are changing. Christianity is struggling again. And churches are trying to find ways to gain attendance at this point. So
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
how ministry even functions in a church begins to look different.
Yeah.
You begin to hear more about seeker sensitive. And,
Yeah.
the music's changing, the format's changing, the messages are changing. They're becoming shorter. They're becoming more like what
It's just a conversation.
exactly
Yeah.
like we know of as a TED Talk today. Some of that's churches is morphing, in many places to that, to try to gain more influence, more attenders.
They're like lowering the walls to hope to bring more people in so that they can bring the influence. But,
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like I used to hear people say it's not cool, but it's kind of a bait and switch kind of thing. You know, I'm going to lure you in with one thing, and then I'm going to really tell you what this is all about.
Which we see was not the most effective.
No, it wasn't. And so at this time, also, what's interesting amongst young people is you start to see this movement toward we want authenticity in our faith experience. We want something real. There's this feeling in which the experience of church and faith had become more form, and maybe lacked the substance or the not substance. Maybe that's not the right word. The sense of relevance and sincerity. Maybe that's a better word. And so you have young people who are wanting experiential faith. And so they want to get into prayer groups and they want to discuss their struggles and share and have very experiential movements in their faith, communion and prayer paths. These are all becoming much more of a thing because people want to touch and feel this whole concept of faith. As far as among young people, of course, times are different by the 2010s. There's internet and there's cell phone, Netflix, and they're all sources of temptation as well as many other things. You begin to have this much more obvious struggle between true for me, not for you. Personal truth versus fixed truth. And so now young people are faced with that ideology. Okay, well, wait, you can have a truth, I can have a truth. And there's not a good way that young people know how to respond to that.
Exactly. Because it's like, again, that's whenever this started to get big and churches kind of blindsided by it of like, oh, well, I mean, I guess it's true for you, but no. And so it's like, I don't even know how to relate with that yet. And so,
right. And churches basically just say, well, it is true for us. That may be true for you, but this is true for us, which I understand, but it's really not accurate. Truth is truth is truth is truth. There's either a truth or there's not a truth. So again, in the culture for young people, the crowd is far less Christian at this point in general. And so that makes being a believer more challenging because you have to kind of stand up against a little bit of the crowd. You have to stand out a little bit. So of course, among Christian young people, things are changing. Now there's a large wave of Christian music. It's been around a while. It's made its way out. You can find CDs and you can watch music videos.
You didn't have a Spotify at the time.
It's starting to come around at this point. And so now you start to have bands that you follow. And then around this time, you kind of get this grunge rocker thing happening in Christian music as well. And so there's some buy-in. And then so Christian young people kind of almost develop this subset culture that they are, even in the public school. Now it's no longer, here are the jocks and here are the populars and here's the, the cowboy group within in the school. Well, now there's the subset of the Christian group. So, which is interesting. And the setting, again, is far more experiential by this point. There's a lot of talk about my struggles. And pray for me. So those are some of the experiences. I think it kind of sets the stage for what's happening today from the 80s, 2010s, and we move to today, the 2020s. Again, in 10 years, a lot happens. Things are very different. Culture is different. Christianity is a shrinking minority, and there's a lot of division even among churches now. Now,
exactly.
It used to be that churches, there were different denominations. I mean, there were some differences, but as a general rule, they all met together. You know, in cities, the Methodist church pastor and the Baptist church pastor and the Assemblies church pastor, they could all meet together and they could discuss things. But they're all on the same page.
They could do church events together, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they might baptize differently or sing a few songs differently, but for the most part, we're on the same page. Well, that's eroding in
Yes.
2020.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, just because you're a church, or even just because you're of a certain denomination, doesn't mean what it used to.
No.
And there's social issues that churches are adopting and following, and churches in some cases they're okay with gender fluidity and accepting that. And they're okay with accepting critical race theory and apologizing for your race. And all of this starts to move into the church, and it gets very confusing. And if you don't buy into this, you face being canceled. You know, and so young people are facing this in their friend groups.
In their day-to-day.
And I mean, they're young people. And so not only are they trying to formulate their faith, but now their whole social standing and their whole life, really, your whole trajectory, the things you post on social media, you can be canceled for your future because of things you say or don't align with.
Yeah.
Whew, what
as
a
early as
frightening-
age 13, 14, all that stuff. You know,
Exactly.
You gotta feel like you have to have everything figured out.
Yeah. And so a lot of pressure on young people. Like there's no consideration anymore in the public arena for Wednesdays and Sundays. There's sporting events and life events and stuff going on, and respect for the church, respect for the Bible, respect for faith. It's really kind of out the window. Faith is viewed more of as a compartmentalized thing at this point. And really, as a general rule, there's not a lot of talk about the culture in the church, and there's certainly a push to not have any talk about the church in the culture.
Yeah.
And so it isolates Christianity over into this little box. It's a compartmentalized secret point. So among young people, we're seeing, atheism is popular today.
It's the assumed position of someone.
Yeah. And variant sexual expressions are encouraged. And transgenderism and gender fluidity and rejection of faith is actually kind of demanded and pushed. And you're forced to buy into all of that. And if you don't, there's great social ramifications for that. Opportunities for sin are greater, obviously, than ever. Young people are in a culture now where to not have a dysfunction is a dysfunction.
Yes.
You're looked down on if you don't have some labels, if you don't have a reasoning for all your behavior, and medication is the norm today. So you put all of that on the table and you say, all right, do some youth ministry, Mr. Youth Pastor. You could look at all of that, and I'm afraid a lot of people who are older look at what's happening today and they just kind of throw up their hands and think, that's it. We're kind of done. Have fun, maybe in youth ministry. But we're seeing the opposite here at Vertical.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna stop talking as much today, and Truett's going to take over at this point, because I want you to talk about what are some of the surprising things that we're seeing in working with young people. Some things that older folks like myself and others might look at and be shocked when you hear what God is actually doing and what is happening, what is actually being effective in working with young people. So tell us, Truett, what are some things that are surprising that are happening with teenagers today?
So, I would say the first surprising thing that, again, not many people would expect, but what we have found to be true here at Driven Youth, at Vertical, is that preaching direct truth instead of objective truth or
subjective instead of
preaching direct and objective instead of subjective truth has been a game changer for people. There's so much information that's out in so many areas. You can Google whatever, any student can do that. Why whatever is not true, or why this is true. And you'll find just page after page after page on Google. So for me as the youth director, and then our leaders as well, to say, hey, this is what the truth is. This right here has authority. The Bible is what's true. And this is what we're going to preach from. And this is what we're going to call everyone towards, is the Bible. Students say, okay, I get it. I understand that. And we're seeing lives changed here whenever they are elevating the Bible
Wow.
And they're putting aside their emotions and they're putting aside what they believe may be true and saying, this is going to be the truth.
Wow.
I'm choosing this to be the truth.
So again, in a culture where everybody says, I have my truth, you have your truth,
Yeah.
and what is truth, and
Yeah.
what is a woman, what is a man,
Yeah.
no one can seem to define those anymore.
Exactly.
You're saying that in the church environment, working with young people, that there's actually an acceptance
Yes.
and an excitement
Yes, exactly.
about people hearing truth and someone saying, this is the truth,
Yes.
the unchanging truth.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think the thing that amplifies that, the preaching and teaching the direct, objective truth, is whenever they know it's coming from someone who has been impacted by it. And whenever they know that that person's passionate about the truth. I think that's what truly speaks is the, look, you have got to understand this, because if you don't understand this, this is the course that your life is going to go on. I think getting that bigger picture and saying, okay, that guy, that girl, my leader, whatever it is passionate about the truth because it's impacted them in their life. So if it's impacted them in their life and they've experienced change and they're that passionate about it, I ought to look into this.
Wow.
I ought to see what this means in my life.
Well, I'm sure they're seeing friends in their social groupings where people who don't believe that, they're seeing what's happening in their life.
Exactly.
They're seeing it fall
More and
apart,
more dysfunction.
struggles. Right.
Yes.
Interesting. So the more bold you are, you're finding a reaction. You're not finding reaction. You're finding acceptance of that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I would say at Driven. What we try to do is we have multiple voices of truth. It's not just me coming up on a Sunday night whenever we meet and saying, here's the truth. See ya.
Right.
But what we try to implement is, okay, I'm going to preach the truth on this topic or this verse, whatever. Now we're going to get into groups and you're going to hear this from other leaders in their lives, and they are going to tell you how it's impacted them. And then they want to hear, where are you going to apply this in your life?
Wow.
Where is this truth going to take root in your heart? And then what fruit could this bear? I think it's getting the direct, objective truth and then getting it into their life so that they can see, wow, if I did apply the fact that Jesus died for my sins and there's peace with God, and that's objective truth, then I could go to sleep without fear.
Wow.
I could wake up and know that God loves me. I can wake up and I want to pray. I want to seek him, all that stuff. I think that is a way that people have kind of discounted. Like they're like, oh, people are so subjective. You ought to go more soft on them.
Right.
What we've experienced at Driven is the more direct we are, and even through the whole church, through vertical, and the more direct we are, the more we say, this is what God calls us to. This is who Jesus is.
Wow.
People say, I want to be there. I'm going to bring a friend.
Wow.
Well,
that is surprising.
Yeah.
Because you'd think up against what's happening today, you would think, okay, well, somehow we're going to need to have more pizza and more fun and more games.
Exactly. Yeah.
And be more soft and be more understanding, be more loving and more accepting of all things.
And you may bring more people in if you do those things.
Yeah.
But I think you will quickly find out that your ministry is going to be run by those people.
Yeah.
Instead of by the gospel.
Yeah. So I just want to say it again, just so I get this in my head. Everybody else can as well. You're speaking truth into relevant issues, into the students' lives.
Yeah.
You're not just talking about disconnected theological concepts.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. It's not, we obviously at Vertical and at Driven, we preach the theological points. We just did a whole series about the pillars of truth in the youth. But we have to also make it apply into the relevant life, day-to-day stuff for them.
Right. But you're bringing truth there for them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is fascinating. It's surprising that it makes sense. We all know what the Bible says, you know, that you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free.
Exactly.
But that's awesome that there's a response in young people to truth. And they're picking up their Bibles.
Yes. People asking, hey, what Bible should I use? How can I get a Bible? Where should I go? What do I do? How do I read this?
Wow. And you're not having to offer them gift cards or PlayStations or anything to read their Bible?
We don't have any of that.
Okay.
No.
They because you speak truth, they're having a desire for truth, and they're seeking God on their own.
Yes. Because they see life change in others.
Yep.
And they know they need life change. And that's what I was going to say. Our second surprising way that God's working in the youth is whenever we as youth leaders, call the students to a higher standard. Whenever we, and not just call them to a higher standard, you have to have the point of, I'm going to meet this student where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show them my life. I'm going to connect with them on a personal level. And now from that, I'm going to show how Jesus has met me in my life. And I'm going to go with them and say, look, here's where we're at. I was there as well.
Mm-hmm.
God calls us to this up here.
Right.
Let me help you get out of this sin. Let me help you get out of this bondage, and let me call you to this higher standard along with me. I'm in this fight with you.
Wow. So, I mean, some might think, well, what you have to do is just accept people, just kind of pat them on the back and reassure them and just be there for them, accept them as they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what you're talking about.
No. And I'm also not talking about from your high horse, from your pride, from your, hey, I'm however old you ought to obey me, saying, have a higher standard, live a better life. Not that either, because that's ineffective.
Okay.
That is instantly how someone will say, not doing that.
Yeah.
But it's the meeting them, showing this right here is who I am. This is who I was outside of Christ.
Right.
I used to live like you do, because students understand that they are unsatisfied in life. They are at least they are understanding that where they're at is not giving them lasting satisfaction. They are finding themselves in more and more death, if you want to say, more and more sin outside of Christ. So we as leaders, it's our role to go to them, find them in their spot, say, hey, I relate with you in this area. I've been there. I get it. I'm not going to stay here with you, but I'm going to say, look, there's life outside. There's freedom outside of that. So this is the standard God calls us to. And you can't do this by yourself, but the Holy Spirit can help you to do this.
Wow.
And we've seen students' lives changed and them connecting, going and finding groups that they're going to have community with, kind of like in the 2010s, like you talked about, how people wanted to talk about their struggles. People wanted to find a relational contact point, right? So that's the thing, is like you need multiple voices of truth, not just the one, but where you can go and you can say, hey, I'm broken, I need help. If that's a friend group or whatever, but it's a call to a higher standard.
So again, you're saying on a personal level, you're finding that leaders meeting with students, and there's openness and honesty, but then a calling them out of their sin, calling them to a higher standard.
Yes.
Not just outward trappings either. Not just put away your phone more kind of thing. Not just, well, I won't go to a list of those things.
Not just don't sin, but look, here's where life is. Here's where you can go, and here's where you should go to find life.
Wow. Here's where peace is in Jesus. Here, you need to take up your cross daily and follow him. You need to surrender your will to God's will on those hard issues. You're finding people respond. Young people respond to that.
Yes, because again, I think it goes back to the first point of the direct truth. We say this is objective. This is where we're going. So I relate with you. I get it, but this is the truth, and we're going up to this standard right here. And again, I think that I've only seen the benefit, or I've only seen that work out whenever you meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
If you go and just say, hey, I'm the leader, you ought to live a higher standard life.
Right.
Ineffective. That's
interesting.
That's what I think that applies to parents as well. If you just say, you ought to just live a higher standard of life.
Right.
Then your student's going to be like, or your kid's going to be like, well, why? You know, that's a huge question that this generation is asking after everything. Well, why do I have to do that? Why should I do that?
Yeah.
So we as leaders say, you know why? Because I walked down that path that you're started on, and I was down here, and it's miserable.
Yeah.
And I found Jesus. He met me here.
Wow.
And now I have life changed, and I'm on a different direction. You know. And they say, okay, I get that.
Yeah. Wow. That's good.
That's what we're seeing here in our youth.
I love it. I mean, it matches with obviously the ministry of Jesus. The disciples were in awe of the fact that he was full of grace and truth.
Yeah.
He was unyielding in what truth was, and the standard, the calling that he had for them. He was gracious with it, but he was truth at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
For sure.
That's surprising.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can call young people to higher standard and they actually respond to it. They don't run from it. They don't, pick it outside the door. They're not They're not running. They're not blasting you on social media.
No.
They're responding, and God's moving because you're calling them to a higher standard.
And what we also find, at least in our youth group, and I believe this to be true if it were continued in other youth groups as well, is that whenever you are raising the standard and whenever you are preaching the direct truth, you're going to bring people who genuinely are seeking that, who genuinely are needing that. I don't think you're going to have as many troublemakers, all that stuff, but you're going to have the people who are there not just to check off the box. And if they're there to check off the box, they're going to hear the truth. Right. But you're reaching the people who are genuinely seeking.
Wow.
If you're doing just the fun games and the pizza and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not against, I'm definitely a proponent for.
Yeah.
But you have to be preaching the direct truth. And that is how you're going to have students experience life change. And that's the most effective ministry, I believe, is whenever a student can go to another student and say, here's Jesus in my life.
Yeah.
It's cool for leaders to do that, but students have to be the ones doing that. You know?
Well, we're like you said, you could offer enough incentives to draw a crowd.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But we're not called to go there for and make numbers.
No, yeah.
We're called to go there for and make disciples.
Exactly.
And so that's exciting. That's surprising that you could call people call young people to a higher standard and they respond.
And people responding and people genuinely having changed lives.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
What else you got?
So another surprising thing is that people are more about the reality of what's happening rather than the wrapper of what it looks like. So, and that's true in the lives, like we talked about with leaders, whenever they're like, I want to know who you actually are. I don't want to know the front that you're putting on. I don't want to just see who is this leader bouncing off the walls kind of, and that's not really even a lot of the leaders we have.
Yeah.
But they want to know, okay, what's the reality of the situation? And then even, I think to be true also in like building facilities and all that stuff. Some people do go, and some churches have really nice facilities, and that's awesome. That's great.
Right.
But we at Vertical, we don't have the nicest youth facilities. We don't. It's great and all.
It's nice.
But,
it's functional.
Yeah, it's functional. But people are coming because of the other students there, and they're coming because they're experiencing life change. You know,
interesting.
Rather than just, oh, they have the most fun games, or they have the best music, or they have the best food, or you know, the best facilities, whatever it may be, kind of thing. You know.
Yeah. So you don't have ping pong tables and foosball tables and game centers and PlayStations.
Not opposed to it,
right? Not that it's bad,
but we're finding that that's not the main draw that people have. You know.
Wow.
And you know, it may benefit to have some of those things, but at the same time, you know, we focus on the community that we have. We focus on preaching and living the truth.
Yeah. So content. Yeah. Above just the externals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, like just to go even more on that, like yes, with the facilities and all that stuff, but even with the leaders is like pulling back of here's who I am. I used to be in that lifestyle as well, but here's the reality of it.
Yeah.
That's not going to lead you to life.
Yeah.
You know,
I can imagine, and I think we all see this today. And if you're involved in social media, we all look at social media, and you know that everybody puts on their social media front.
The rapper.
Nobody posts the picture of how terrible their day was, or I just spilled all this stuff, or this bill just came in, or
I just made myself look like a fool on whatever sorts of things.
Exactly. No, we're putting our, hey, look at this cool place I'm at, or look at this cool thing I just bought, or whatever,
Absolutely.
So into that setting, I'm sure there is a hunger for young people to say, okay, what's behind all of that?
Exactly. Yes.
Because we all know, everybody knows that that's a front.
Yes.
So what's behind it?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it makes sense.
Exactly. I was gonna say, they all fall in line with each other of like, give me the real stuff. Give me the real truth. I don't want just the fake front.
Yep.
I want the real. And I see that. I know that's true over many generations, but especially in this generation, it appears that they are totally disinterested.
Yeah.
But I believe that they really don't know that they can experience reality. They don't know that they can experience real life. So whenever we can tell them and show them this is real life, they're like, this is what I've been looking for. Wow. This is what I've been wanting.
So again, I want to say it one more time.
Yeah.
You're saying that as you and other leaders are more vulnerable and honest with your lives and where Jesus has met you, changed you, and calls you, they are responding with like desire.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So direct and real.
That's cool.
That's
Surprising.
yes.
Good.
Absolutely.
All right.
And so the last, or one of the other last surprising points, is that we put an emphasis on the personalness of God and His love, and we see students responding very much to that. I think a lot of that happens because they have bought the lie, and they've also heard the lie that God doesn't care about you. If God is real, He doesn't care about you.
Right.
Obviously, look at your situations or all that kind of stuff, those kinds of lies. And so whenever people hear that God loves them personally, and not just that statement, but hey, look, here's what He did. Jesus washed the disciples' feet. That's a personal act of servanthood,
Right.
And so Jesus has done that for us, dying on the cross. It's a personal act of saying, I'm taking your place. And the more that we have preached that about Jesus being personal, God being loving, intentionally loving, meet the Creator, meeting you where you're at with 7 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
People are like, okay, I get it. This is not just a tagline or a phrase, but that's real. I get that. And so that's what we've found. Like, yes, be direct with the truth, be vulnerable, but be filled with grace at the same time. Like you were saying, Jesus was filled with grace and truth.
Yeah.
And so we can't just say, here's the standard, here's the standard, here's the standard. If you never meet the standard, you're done,
Right.
But it's, hey, God calls you where you are at right here. He's meeting you where you're at, and He's calling you to change and come towards Him. And He's going to put the change in you to come towards Him.
Yeah.
To
where He meets them in the midst of their family issues, their personal issues, their school issues, their social media issues, wherever they are.
Yeah, which is why we as leaders say we've got to model that same character.
Yeah.
If God's meeting them where they're at, how foolish of us would it be to say, well, I'll just portray me as authority, and you have to.
And put on my best front.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But being totally real, totally honest, and dismantling the lie that God doesn't love you, dismantling the lie even that God isn't real, but saying, look, God is very real. You are here intentionally. There are reasons that you are here today, and look how God loves you, and so again, another thing we say a lot in the youth is that the gospel isn't about you, but it is for you. It's not,
I love it.
You're not the one that the gospel is about. Obviously, it's about Jesus. Jesus is the center of the gospel.
Yeah.
Jesus is the one who died on the cross for your sins. He's the center of the gospel, but it was for you personally, individually,
Wow.
And I think people have kind of lost that. They get so nervous about, I might be thinking about myself too much.
Right.
So people disassociate with it. And then some people say, I am the center of the gospel, which that doesn't work. You lose the picture of what Jesus really is, but the gospel is not about you, but it is for you.
Wow.
Jesus died for you. Right.
So, I mean, again, I can see now that you're saying all that, I can think, okay, in a culture today that has lost any concept of value and worth in me from God.
Yeah.
That my worth is all in my own desires.
Yeah. Everything you can put forward, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in a world where the front, the media, the social media front is so big, and in a world where movies are they're ultra realistic, but we all know they're not real.
Yeah.
To have an experience where you talk about God, the Creator, being very real, and so real that He's personal with me. I mean, it makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Now that I hear it.
Again, that's what the students are wanting. They're wanting a personal connection, because I think everything is so fake, so virtual, so disconnected. Like the isolation is insane these days.
Yeah.
And so to say, hey, Jesus is meeting you where you are at, that's life-changing to a person. That's life-changing to someone who's lonely. That's life-changing to someone who's filled with worry.
Yeah.
And then we say, hey, look, Jesus died to take away that worry.
Wow.
He died and rose again to give you peace.
Yeah.
And to obviously it's not just for that reason, but it's to take away the sins of the world. But
and so again, you're not talking about just we accept you, we love you, pat you on the back, kind of thing. You're talking about Jesus meeting us in our filth, in our struggle.
Yeah.
But changing us there and,
Yes.
and giving us life there.
Absolutely.
That kind of personal connection is
Yes.
what you're talking about.
Yes.
And you're finding response. Young people.
Crazy response.
Okay.
Yeah. We may not have the biggest youth group, but I think the youth group depth and theological understanding and in a genuine passion and desire for Jesus is just
Wow.
like awesome.
Well, those are surprising.
Yeah.
And, I look at all of that. I'm overwhelmed by it. I'm grateful that God is working, that you get to be a part of all of that.
Yes.
And it's happening here at Vertical.
Yeah.
I'm in awe of all of that. Grateful. I hope it's encouraging for people who are listening today.
Yeah.
Because I know it'd be easy to sit on the outside and have our own memories of the past and the way things were and think, well, young people today, they just don't get it,
Yeah.
And some of that's true. But I think what we're seeing, though, however, is God is keeping his word again,
Yes.
as he always does and always faithful. I think of there's a couple of verses I was thinking about as we were preparing for today. They're both from Isaiah. First is from Isaiah 59:19. And God says through Isaiah, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. So I see that. I mean, what you're saying in the midst of a culture today where the enemy just seems to be just flooding, it's tsunami waves of just immorality and lies, that God is raising up a standard.
Yes.
In the midst of crashing waves and flood, he has an immovable standard that he's raising up, and it's in these young people.
Yes, absolutely. And that right there also is what we are trying to emphasize. And I believe really produces that life change is whenever you say, look, hey, we're living in what I would even say historic times.
Yeah,
we're living in
that's true.
times that are going to be in the history books. It's crazy times.
Yep.
But God is choosing, he has chosen people to change a generation.
Yep.
And so y'all get to be a part of that.
Yeah.
We get to be a part of that.
Yeah,
The
true.
church, that's their responsibility.
Yeah, it's true, to lift up a standard. So these young people will be part of that immovable rock,
Exactly.
chosen ones who will be used by God to stand fixed in the midst of such crashing waves of culture.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other verse I thought of that fits with this is also from Isaiah. It's in chapter 58, verse 12. And there it says that this is in the context of those who seek the Lord, who prioritize him in their life, who surrender their will to him. He says, those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in. And boy, if there's ever a need in our culture, in our day, for someone to say, look, here is the way to life. We've tried a lot of other ways, and the buildings have fallen down, and there's destruction everywhere. Here's the restoration of the way to walk in life. That will come. God's promise is to those who seek him. So that seems to be happening as well. You're seeing young people respond to that call.
For sure. And I was going to say just also on that, like the ones who's going to restore the generations of before, sadly, it's not those who are 70 and above.
Yeah.
They should hold to the truth. They should speak into the culture. So they should still be a huge influence in their family.
Right.
But they need to make sure that the next generation gets to know what they have known.
Yeah.
And so
true.
I'm all for that and those people holding the truth, but it has to go to the next generation.
Yeah. If we don't pass it on to the next generation, then it doesn't get passed on. It just dies
It's done
with the generation.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what do you say as youth pastor? You're the one front line with these young people. You're seeing God work. You're seeing what's happening in their lives. What do you say to the ones like me, my age, even the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond? What do you say to them today to give them some encouragement, to give them some hope, to help them know how to pray, to help them know how to be a part of what God's doing? What do you say to them today?
Yeah. Okay. My first thought is we're going to have to break the agreement that we've made in our head and not buy the lie that our best days are behind us.
Hold on. Let me just stop and take that in, because you're right. That is an agreement. that I think Christianity,
Yeah.
many Christians have made that, well, it's done. It's over. Our best days are behind us.
Yeah. The 60s were great. The church was moving. Billy Graham was preaching. Those were the best days.
Yeah. And, and you're right.
And they were great days. They were great. I'm a huge Billy Graham fan. I'm a huge fan of hymns. I'm a huge fan of Keith Green, all through that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But to say, well, those were the best days.
Yeah. Then you're making an agreement about the next days.
Yeah.
If you say those are the best days.
You say, all right, well, this generation, write them off.
So sorry for you, basically.
Tough. Should have been born 50 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I just need to pause on that for just a moment because that's true. I mean, and it's easy to think that. It's easy to say, man, back in 2010, it wasn't like this, or back in the 80s, it wasn't like this, or back in the 70s, or back in the 60s. You just keep going.
And I agree. It wasn't like that. But at the same time, if you are focused on our best days are behind us, we don't have a future here, then one, I would say, where's your hope?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And two, like, why would you write off this upcoming generation that needs Jesus so badly?
Yeah.
Because like we talked about, like this generation needs direct truth.
Yeah.
They need relevancy. They need love. They need to know that God is real and he loves them so much that he sent his son to die for their sins, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to teach these are what sins are. So we got to step out of that. We got to live a higher standard life. And then to say, best days are behind us. This generation, tough luck.
And, I don't know if anyone sets out to mean this, but it's kind of the intent. It's kind of what the result is, maybe. Is it because if you say our best days are behind us, then everybody today is only left with, well, I guess I was born at the wrong time.
Yes.
I guess my future is hopeless.
Yeah.
And, I think most Christians would say, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. But it's the agreement we're making.
Yeah.
That those were better. This is worse.
Yeah.
So
and it's like,
that doesn't cast any hope. That doesn't say the Lord is lifting up a standard.
Exactly.
What a day to be alive. You are the hope. You have a future.
God vision for revival. Zero vision for revival is what I would say.
You're right.
And isn't that what this generation needs so badly? And for us to say, hey, the Great Awakening back in the 1800s, those were the best days.
Yeah.
Tough or whatever, Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, all that stuff. It's like, what is it going to be for this generation where we say, hey, maybe there are better days ahead of us.
Yeah.
Maybe in my family with my kids, if they truly owned their faith and they went and told other people, that would be better days than we live in right now.
Yeah. And maybe there's some even unconscious ways that this is happening, that people say those kind of things. Even like, well, I remember when, hymns were the thing.
Yep.
I remember when we went to church 3 nights a week. Or
It's
I
just
remember
a sorry excuse what church looks like now because they're not, people wearing whatever clothes and people, singing whatever songs.
Yeah.
I get it. I get that it's different. But again, it goes to, are we going to reach this group where they're at?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we going to say, y'all just don't know anything, y'all are just destined for terribleness.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But instead saying, I see the hurt. I see the pain.
Right.
Our best days are not behind us, but I'm going to pour into this person. I'm going to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, I want you to go and own your faith and share it to the next person.
Yeah.
Because I'm sharing my faith with you.
Yeah. And cast a vision, like Isaiah says, those from among you, you're going to rebuild the old waste places.
Yes.
You're going to raise up a new generation.
Yeah.
You're going to be called the restorer of the streets to dwell in. And it's going to look different. It's going to sound different.
Yeah.
Your music's going to be different. Your expression is going to be different. Your format's going to be different. Your technology is different. Your communication style is different.
Yep.
But it's the same gospel. It's the same God.
Yes.
And you're going to change the future.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
Yes.
I get it.
And that's what I'm saying. Like people want and need freedom still to this day.
Yeah.
People needed it back in the 60s, back in the 70s, back in the 80s. You name it, whatever decade you want to say.
Yeah.
People need and want freedom. They just maybe don't know it yet, but they need it and they want it. And so we have to say, I am going to set the captives free.
Yeah.
I'm going to go now to this person that's under 18
Right.
and share with them my life about how I was stuck in bondage and how Jesus met me in my bondage. You know, after I've gotten to know them, we have a relationship. It's not just going to be a one-time thing, but you have to say, look, let's be intentional about this.
Right.
And let's see revival start, you know?
Yeah.
We're seeing it begin with some of the students here in the youth, and we're going to continue on all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to start whenever you think our best days are behind us. I challenge you to deny that thought and then wage war against that thought and say, I'm going to pray for better days. I'm going to make a difference. You know, I'm going to agree with God that there is a generation that's coming that can renew the old generations, that can bring forth, you know, new life into old waste places. You know?
And they're gonna write new songs.
Yes,
and they're gonna develop new expressions of how we communicate our faith.
Yeah, it's gonna sound different. It's gonna look different. It's not gonna be, you know, whatever kind of church, but But if they are passionate, they're speaking the truth, they are living their lives really for Jesus, then man, I'm there for it, you know? And that is better days than we're in right now.
It is.
You know, if we can get people to understand that Jesus loves them personally and that he's calling them to a higher standard because he loves them,
right?
Then, man, that's a different generation right there. That's better than where we're at right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm super encouraged by all of this. It's exciting to hear how God is working, and that there's surprising ways that I think a lot of people might not have ever thought that would be the way that God works. So thank you for all of that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your work here, obviously, at Vertical. And I hope for you who are watching and listening, I hope it's been encouraging to you. And it'll be a motivator for you to pray and have hope.
Yeah.
That there's some days coming.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what I'm saying. If you can make the agreement in your head that, hey, our best days may still be ahead of us, you'll find a reason. You'll find passion to reach this generation with the gospel.
True.
You will.
It's true.
If you can start saying, there are better days ahead of us.
Yeah.
I need to now make this step.
Right.
I need to now call this person.
Yeah.
Or whatever it may be.
Sure. Well, and those two verses, Isaiah 59:19, Isaiah 58:12, those give us hope as well, and should become, part of what we're making agreements with.
Yes.
I want to agree with that the Lord is lifting up a standard.
Yes.
And the Lord is raising up those who will rebuild and restore the streets to dwell in.
Yes.
So I'm encouraged. So I'd say to you, pray for the young people today. Support what God is doing.
Yep.
And invest where you can in their lives. Support and encourage them. I think how valuable it would be, for those who are older to come alongside the younger generation and say, man, God has a purpose for you.
Yes.
And I've seen him work in my day. I know he's going to work in your day.
Yes.
And I'm praying for you.
All of that encouragement right there. That's the, I don't remember what the verse is, but it talks about old men dream dreams and all that, all that stuff.
Exactly.
And so it's like, it's the generations that have lived further along, pouring into the next generation, pouring into the next generation. That right there is what sparks change.
That stokes the fire.
Yes.
And makes change. That's good.
Yes,
good.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you haven't liked or subscribed to our channel, hope you will. And share this with friends to be an encouragement to them as well. And we're grateful you joined us today and look forward to more podcasts in the future. But thanks again, Truett, for being with us today.
Yeah.
Thanks.